You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello and welcome to WCAT. I'm Kiki Latimer, your host for the Catholic Bookworm. And we have with us here today a wonderful author, amongst other things, Ben Bongers. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Kiki. How are you?
Good. So I've been enjoying reading two of Ben's books over the last week. His True Love, 12 Christmas Stories, which was very interesting to read, very different take on the 12 days of Christmas. And this is your latest one, right? The Saint Nikolas Society?
Saint Nicholas came out first and then 12 days, but
okay.
they're all within months of each other. So.
Okay, but you wrote the 12 days first, correct?
Technically, I wrote the 12 days first over 12 years for my wife for Advent gift. But as far as putting them together in one compilation to package together in a book, that came out about a month ago.
Okay.
And then Saint Nikolas Society came out in April.
Okay. Well, both wonderful, very interesting development of your writing. But why don't you start us off with a prayer, since we are the Catholic Bookworm?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. As Daniel prayed in this canticle, bless the Lord, all your works of the Lord. Sun and moon, bless the Lord. Stars of heaven, bless the Lord. All you beasts, wild and tame, bless the Lord. We pray that we all recognize your creation and hear your truth in the stories you wish us to tell. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Well, thank you. Well, hopefully our interview will bless the Lord.
Let's hope.
And help other people do the same. So you've got a really crazy bio, so I'm just going to let you tell, so do I. But
yeah, I'm a ranch kid from Nebraska. I'm an only child, so needless to say, you have a lot of time on your hands, so you create your own worlds. I was never told that I can't do something. It was always, well, give it a try. So I gave everything a try. I was a teacher for a time at a Catholic school, K through 12. I sang opera professionally around the world for a little over 35 years. I became a sommelier, a higher level sommelier, which is a person that works with wine and spirits and can pretty much by smell, look, and taste tell you where the wine came from, what the wine will be good to pair with food-wise, or what beer will, pair well.
Can you turn water into wine?
Only if there was like wine in the bottom of the glass to begin with. And you pour it, stirs it up. No, I wish I could, but no, I wish I could.
You just have to plant a vineyard and water it. It works.
That is the only other way. There's got to be that mediator called a plant.
Yes.
We're not the almighty on that one. But no, I did contract cancer of the tongue, of all things, 3 years ago, and had half of my the left side of my tongue taken out. And
so that was recent. That was recently.
Yeah.
So are you still able to sing?
I am. But I don't do full operas anymore, only because the flap that's in there is actually my left wrist. This area of the left wrist. I never know when it's going to swell up, and when it swells up a little bit too thick, it's not as movable. So the ability to
and you wind up sounding like I do when I sing.
No, not at all.
I'm tone deaf. Well, I'm not actually tone deaf, but I can't sing.
St. Augustine said he who sings prays twice. He never said it had to sound good. He just said, if you sing, you're praying twice. It hooks up to the heart. So but that's where I am today. I went back to school and got my gerontology degree, a master's degree in gerontology. So I work
All
with.
right, stop there. Hold on. So you went from, well, not from wine to song, but from song to wine,
Yeah.
which I love. But that's a huge jump from wine to gerontology. So tell us a little about that journey, because that's
Well,
fascinating.
my mom and dad, in fact, while I was writing the Saint Nicholas, my mom and dad were older and started aging and having maladies that weren't going to, survive. So over a 6-year period of time, I lived in San Francisco at the time, and over a 6-year period of time, I would fly every 3 weeks to Florida to take care of them for a week, and then go back, do a concert, fly back to Florida, go do an opera. In the middle of the opera rehearsal time, go back down to Florida, help them. So it was about 6.5 years of that.
Wow.
And I realized midway through that I actually am enjoying working with the elderly as much as I am singing in front of 4,000 people and yelling my guts out. So I early on started thinking, okay, I really am enjoying working with the elderly, and decided, okay, let's take the full dive. I was still singing at the time. I was still writing at the time. I was still working with my parents. I was still working in the wine industry. I was doing all of these things at the same time.
Sounds like
But
my
managed
life.
to get the gerontology degree from San Francisco State University. So.
Did you do it online, or were you there?
Oh no, I was in class.
Okay.
And I would set up. I knew when my classes would be. I would leave class at, I believe it was 6:20 on Thursday, be at the airport by 7:00, be on the plane by 8:15, be in Florida at 5 a.m., take care of my parents through the weekend, fly back on a Tuesday or Wednesday, be back in class at 4:35 on Thursday or Tuesday.
Okay, my life's almost that crazy, but not quite.
It's all about scheduling. It's all about scheduling. And the nice part is, while I was on a 5.5-hour flight, I could write. I always had my iPad with me or my computer with me. And that's how Saint Nikolas Society was actually written, was on the plane.
Okay, wow. That's fascinating. So which book would you like to discuss first?
Let's go with Saint Nikolas Society first, only because it was the first one written. So we'll do this justification.
Now, it was the first one written or the first one published?
I'm sorry, first one. Well, okay, it gets confusing. First one written technically in book form.
Okay.
And first one published.
Okay.
The 12 Days of Christmas, or True Love, 12 Days of Christmas, my true love gave to me as the key on this. I wrote the 12 Days of Christmas, taking just the title of each phrase, over a 12-year period of time for my wife. We were Portage Church mice, being an opera singer way early in my career. My wife is an opera stage manager, so both of us are in the art. We decided, okay, we don't have a whole lot of money to give gifts to each other. We like giving small things for Advent as Advent gifts. So I started writing, starting with the first day of Christmas. And after about 3 months, she was like, so what are you writing for number 2? What are you writing for number 3? Are we going to do this? I really want another story. And she started asking this in June. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm on the hook. So I started writing, wherever the next one was going to be over those 12 years. After about the 4th year, she said, this is going to be a book someday, right? I really want you to publish it someday. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, after I was done with the 12, and after I had my meeting with Sebastian over at En route Publishing, it was like, so what else have you got? And not even thinking, it just came out. Well, I have the 12 Days of Christmas in a different way. So technically, St. Nicholas came out first, but 12 Days of Christmas over 12 years.
Over 12 years.
Yeah.
I ask that because reading the 12 days, you really do see the development of your writing skills. They get better and better. the first one is actually my least favorite. I liked it. It was sort of something you could read to a child or a grandchild.
And that's the reason it was written that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went into it, thinking that was who you were as a writer. And of course, by the time I got to Three French Hens, which is probably one of my favorites of them, I was like, whoa, we've turned a corner here. And this is a story much more for adults or maybe teenagers, because obviously it gets into much more difficult topics as you go along, and language changes. And so I found the 12 stories fascinating in and of themselves, but I also found them fascinating in your development of writing and as a person, and what kind of topics you were willing to tackle. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was taught very early on that there is no topic off the table. We are all human beings. We are all going to face things that make us very uncomfortable. And it's how we look at those, how we explore those, and how we develop ourselves and can express ourselves, that we need to really take hold of everything. I don't care what the topic might be. It might be something as mundane as saying hi to the mailman. It might be something as really in deep as in the instance of Three French Hens, 3 girls, very young girls, having to go through World War II, and how they develop and how the friendship develops through the years.
It's really
keep it within 20 pages.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you do deal with a lot of topics in both books, where I got the impression at first, and maybe you want to talk about it, that you struggled with what we'd consider inappropriate language where it's appropriate. So the story calls for someone to say F you or oh shit. And you have to bite that bullet or not. And I sensed at first that was a difficult bullet for you to bite. Like you weren't sure where you wanted to go with that, but eventually you recognize this isn't just gratuitous stuff that you're throwing in for thrills, but appropriate to evil situations, and appropriate to a particular character who may be in a bar, where they wouldn't be going, oh, poop.
Right, exactly.
So tell me about that transition for you as a writer, because I definitely saw it in there.
Oh, yeah.
And there were moments where I could feel your struggle as a writer, like, oh, no, he's not going there yet,
If you're going to use the F-bomb, if you're going to use oh shit, if you're going to use any of those terms, it has to be done. Well, it can't be overly done, because if you overdo it, it loses its actual impact later on when it becomes very necessary to express yourself. I find it very interesting that there are a lot of words in the United States, or in English in general, that we can use but choose not to use. When I lived in Germany, no word was off the table at any time. On TV, in movies, in church, in general relationships. If that's the way you feel, that's what you express, period.
Interesting. We have that Puritan background here.
Exactly right. And it's really funny because in Germany, I constantly heard, oh, you Americans, you're so puritanical. You think so pure all the time, even though you're not.
Right. Yeah. I always find it interesting with European films. If somebody gets out of bed, they're naked, because most people are naked in bed. But here, no matter how sexual a scene is, they have all their clothes on.
That's right. That's right. And that's another thing in Germany. There are nude beaches on the Rhine or everywhere else, and you'll have kids on the same beach with adults, and nobody thinks anything of it.
Right.
Over here, needless to say, that's never going to happen. The Germans, actually, in my personal expression, they're very correct in that if you take something that's natural and you make it salacious, then all of a sudden it's going to draw the negative connotation. If you
Right.
accept it as natural, you accept it as a God-given thing, and celebrate it for that, no evil can.
Well, I always say to people, a bikini is much sexier than naked for most people.
Hey, you don't want to see me in the speedo. I can tell you that right now. Happens.
Oh, I don't even want to see me in a bikini these days, but that's beside the point. So let's talk about Saint Nicholas Society. You've got two different stories going on. One is a novel, and one is a historical novel.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of people, I call it a double novel, and it's exactly that. It's two very independent novels. You can read strictly the Saint Nicholas Society by itself, or you can read Fred's story, the modern day story, by itself. But the big thing is they have a lot of crossover. And there are crossed over threads that actually fill in a much, much larger and longer story. And the big idea is we face the same evils. We face the same goodness. We face the same situations today that Saint Nicholas of Myra faced 1700 years ago. There's no difference. Again, take it back even farther, it could have been Mr. Ugg facing the dinosaur. He still had, demons and evil things facing him that we have today. The big thing is, how do we face those adversities, and how do we overcome personal adversities, societal adversity? Anywhere you go, you're going to face adversity. And it's how do we come through that, and how are we known for that? And the other big thing was, particularly in the St. Nicholas story, I wanted to dust off the plaster statue of St. Nicholas. I wanted to get rid of, the ho, 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 and show who he really was. And it took about a year and a half's worth of really in-depth research. In fact, Saint Nicholas of Myra, which is in Turkey, is now actually buried in Bari, Italy. His remains were taken over when the Saracen and when the Muslim Islam was coming into that area. They were afraid that he would be desecrated, so they actually took his remains to Bari, Italy, and created a new we're talking now 800 years ago, a new cathedral there for him with his remains. And the big thing about Saint Nicholas that people don't realize is he spent time in prison, in Roman prison.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That was interesting. I was reading that this morning. This is back in 1994, they actually opened his sarcophagus to revitalize the sarcophagus. In the sarcophagus, of course, are his bones, his skull, all of his remains. Any reindeer?
No, those are on the outside. The whole thing is no. But they took his remains and they took really great high-resolution camera pictures of his remains. Oh. And from that, they were actually able to reconstruct out of clay and out of plastic what his face actually looked like.
Oh my goodness.
He
looks like Santa Claus. Oh my gosh, he's got the same cheeks. Oh my, the same. Oh my goodness. That's wild. Isn't that amazing?
But the thing that you kind of notice in this picture is his nose was broken so badly so many times in the prison that he didn't have bone up here anymore. It was just scar tissue and cartilage. His left eye was actually displaced and moved down and off to the left about 1/4 of an inch because his face was broken so badly. They found actual scarring from whips on his back, on the ribs of his back and the spinal column. That means he was whipped clear down to the bone. And they think that he had a pad of scar tissue on his back, at least 1/2 to full inch thick. So he didn't really feel his back.
Yeah, welcome to Christianity and defending the faith, right?
And that's the whole key. A lot of times when you see him in fact, you'll see his icon back here. You'll see a lot of times they'll do the blessing with the hand like this, but you'll notice his fingers are almost always crooked. The reason being, his fingers were broken so many times he couldn't straighten them forward. At least that's the story that I got from the Dominican priest that was in charge of his remains in Bari, Italy. So from there,
one of the questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
My husband, one of his questions was, well, how much do we know about Saint Nicholas? So where did you go for information?
Oh, well, I went right to the source. I went to a Dominican priest who was in charge of his remains in Bari, Italy, and created a back and forth on email with him. And he sent me quite a few photographs and translations of things of Saint Nicholas and about Saint Nicholas from his day. Wow. Then I went through and I researched a lot of the people that were at the Nicene Council, where he actually went to with Constantine, First Council of Nicaea. Found out through a lot of the writings of the day that Nicholas actually was a confidant of Constantine. In fact, so much so that Constantine actually set up, and people don't seem to realize this, he set up the first social security system. Mm-hmm. And what he did was he would send large sums of money to certain trusted people. These trusted people would give money to the poor, the sick, the widows, so on and so forth. Nicholas was one of these people that was the overseer of these funds that would go out to the poor, the sick, the widowed, so on and so forth. So he was not only a defender of the faith, but he was also, by Constantine, deemed willing to hand out money of Rome to people who were in need.
Well, your story, you really bring it to life for us. Your writing, I just realized, reminded me this morning a little bit of Taylor Caldwell. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I am.
She's Pure and Glorious Physician. She really brings, the saints' lives in a lot of detail. And so you do have a lot of detail that brings the time period to life, the clothing, the atmosphere of the day.
I appreciate that. It took a lot of research.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Let's see. Just looking here. So one of the things you mentioned is that these stories are important to us now because things haven't changed that much. And a lot of people would say, well, of course they've changed a lot. What do you mean by that when you say they haven't changed that much?
Well, if you look back historically, saints are not born. We are all born the same way. We all go through the same things. And there's a real need today to understand that we keep looking at these plaster statues. We keep looking at the marble. And these were real people. These were people just like you and me. There is no reason you and I can't be a marble statue in somebody's church someday. We have a real true need today, more than ever, especially after COVID, of community. We're never going to get to heaven by ourselves. I mean, we all hopefully know this. We need to set up a community where not only we are helping people, but they are helping us. And it may be in ways we don't even realize you're helping us. If you're helping the neighbor who is a 90-year-old woman, you're helping her. You think you're helping her, but she's helping you in the respect of you have this need to help someone. She may tell you things that you have never heard. She may feel more for you than some of your own family members feel for you. So there is reciprocation by just helping people. Again, I come back to, we're all going to face adversity, just like Saint Nicholas did, just like we all do today. And it's not that we're facing adversity, because all of us will. It's how we authentically face that adversity by how we're going to be judged. Okay, I had half of my tongue cut out. I mean, okay.
Right.
If I went into that going, woe is me, oh, so terrible, oh, this, oh, that. No. Instead, what I did was I made fun of it. I kept the humor. I had a tracheotomy. You can probably still see the scar. So I had my tongue cut out. My mouth was swollen. I had to breathe through my neck. So what was the first thing I did after I could get out of bed? I had a pinwheel, and I lifted my tracheotomy, and I blew through my tracheotomy in the pinwheel to make the pinwheel spin. I actually had a little hand piano that was air operated. Normally hold it up to your mouth. I took a piece of rubber and I put it between, and I was playing this with my throat. Those kinds of things.
Humor is amazing for getting through adversity.
Exactly. And hopefully in Saint Nikolas of Myra, you see some of that humor in very serious situations. This is how many people have lived through adversity their entire lives, by using humor. But it's mainly, how do we face this adversity, and how do we authentically, not just, oh, yes, I'm so holy, I made it through. No, authentically. Can you make it through this with true spirit in a really good and healthy way?
There's a wonderful painting by Grunewald. I don't know if you're familiar with The Temptation of Saint Anthony in the Desert.
Yes.
And I teach a course, or I have in the past, called Silence and Solitude. And I say in the course that I think I hold up sort of a blank piece of paper. And I say, a lot of people think that silence looks like a blank piece of paper. But I said, actually, this is the picture of silence. And I show The Temptation of Saint Anthony. And it's Saint Anthony, he's sort of fallen onto his back, and he's being attacked by demons and wild animals and lustful women, and everything's attacking him. And he's rolled backwards. But the important thing is that he's laughing.
Right.
He's laughing.
Right.
And that's the real picture of silence, of inner silence and solitude, is to be in the world, in the chaos, in the hurricane, but you have that center of silence and holy laughter. That's so important.
That's brilliant. That's exactly it. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, we faced COVID. We faced diseases like AIDS every day today. Well, they had the plagues back in Saint Nicholas's day. In fact, the plague took his parents. He was orphaned at the age of 9 or 10. We have isolation today. We have elders that haven't seen anyone for 6 months living at home. They have groceries delivered. They have everything delivered to them. They haven't seen a human being face to face or had somebody touch their hand in 6 months.
Yeah, the isolation was horrible.
That's right. And they had isolation back in St. Nicholas's day. And isolationism as well. We want to hunker down anytime anyone was attacking us and keep everybody out. Well, same thing back then with the Roman soldiers in Greece and everyone else. Economics were an issue back then, just like they are now. Scandals, ongoing wars. We are living exactly the same life St. Nicholas did, but we now have computers to broadcast that worldwide. That's
so you're telling me human nature hasn't changed, huh?
That's right.
A few minutes ago, you said something that I want to go back to, and that was, you said, I hope everyone knows, but I don't think they do. So that's why we're going back to it, that we need community to move forward, to attain sanctity, to help one another. We live in this very, we talked about Puritan, we have this Protestant work ethic that surrounds us, that you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. You do it yourself.
Right.
You don't do it by the grace of God, and you certainly don't do it with the help of your friends or your family. You do it on your own. So talk to us a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people watching this, even though they're Catholic, but they may not be Catholic, have a sense of that I have to do it myself. I have to find my inner strength, work on my inner child, do it on my own. And
go with God. That's great.
Especially, there's a sense, I just was at a conference last weekend on assisted suicide, where the idea is we don't want to be a burden to other people.
Right.
And I was the one who stood up and said, I want to be a burden. I tell that to my children and grandchildren. I want to be a burden because my being a burden will help them attain sanctity, will help them become better persons. Right now, my family, it's not an elderly, mentally ill, blind 80-year-old woman. We're taking care of her. And she lives at my daughter's house with a 9-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 16-year-old sons. And she's a burden. And I have seen these 3 teenagers rise to the occasion and become entirely different people than they were when she moved in 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's been beautiful to watch the transformation really of our whole family having to pitch in to help Carolyn. And
that's right.
So talk about that a little bit.
You just said it all. You really did. I was raised in a ranch or farmer community in Nebraska. My great grandfather lived with my grandpa and grandma. We would see them, 3 times, 4 times a week. We were always helping each other. My great grandpa would babysit me. Then my grandparents would babysit me. Meanwhile, my dad would go and help his uncle, who was in elder care, every weekend. So the idea of family is much larger than my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents. Family is whoever is in your collective group. We call our church parish a community for a reason. We are a small town of itself. Every parish is its own small town. I look at it as the deacon and those people that are assisting in that parish. They are kind of like the public works. They keep everything going. They are there to take care of whatever situation needs to be taken care of. Meanwhile, your priest and bishop are more or less like the mayor. They come in for 5 years, 10 years, 11 years. They move on. They're voted out of office, quote unquote. But the community itself is there to help each other. And it could be emotionally, physically, financially, whatever that case may be. We are there to help each other. Case in point, a person feels they don't need anybody else. So they isolate themselves. They have more psychological issues. They have more financial issues, and they have more heartfelt issues of sorrow, of mental illness, so on and so forth. His name was Howard Hughes. He had all of these issues because he became isolated. He isolated himself from all of these things. Meanwhile, you have Mother Teresa. She is amongst diseased. She is financially strapped constantly. She never had an overage of money. Any money she had, she would always pour back into other situations. And at her death, they said it was one of the happiest deaths that they had ever seen, simply because all she had around her was family. All she had around her was community. So we spiritual beings cannot live in isolation. We have to be able to talk to other people, feel love and contentment from other people, have back and forth. I don't care. I'm not political, so I don't care if it's right wing, left wing, center wing, up wing, down wing. As long as we have a dialogue, not physical, but a verbal dialogue where we keep an open mind and understand, or try to understand, where the other person is coming from. And you're going to find a lot of that in the Saint Nikolas Society. We have a Chinese woman from China who is Fred's bane of his existence. He is driven crazy by her. But by the end, she really is one of his best friends. We have Connie, who is from Guatemala, who is a domestic servant in one of the rich houses in San Francisco. Again, somewhat isolated from the rest of society in that day and age. But through community, not only of her community of other Hispanic and Spanish speaking people, but her community with Fred and with Betty, that we realized that it doesn't matter where you're from. You are still in a community that helps each other, listens to each other, and eventually prop each other up when necessary.
I'm interested, I haven't finished it, but the relationship of Betty with her children and how, she tried for so long to convince herself that her children were good, but just busy.
I dare you to read the entire book and go to the very last chapter and not need a handkerchief at the end.
But it was very interesting that, she was holding on to the idea that, her children could have sort of abandoned her like this because they're busy. But she can't keep up that facade forever. And of course, Fred has helped her kind of break through that and say, this isn't right.
And she downright hates him for it at the time. But he's the one that tells her the truth. And he's the one that actually she will listen to because she knows he's telling the truth. Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Anything else you want to talk about with Saint Nicholas? What do you love most about it? I haven't finished it, so no spoilers. But
no spoilers. The one big thing people need to realize, and I've had. It's really funny. People think they're going to take this to their holy hour and read this. I don't suggest that. I do need to say I would consider this a rated R book simply for reality. I don't candy coat things. I put things out there exactly the way they are. So if you're expecting this nice, very pastoral type of book, this ain't it.
Right.
I don't candy coat things. Fred, at the very beginning in the Fred story, I won't give away what he has, but he's got a very life-threatening issue going on. And he is flat out angry, really, really, truly angry with God. And you will see and hear things that might pivot you back a little bit, but this is a real situation where he is angry with God. And listen, all you got to do is read the Psalms. David was angry with God and wrote it down, and we still pray it. Being angry with God is not a terrible thing. Being angry with God and continuing to be angry with God is a bad thing. You're going to see in the book how he comes to realize that the anger at God is more about anger of other situations. So again, I don't candy coat things. So you're going to see that.
I always say anger with God at least is a good starting place that he's there and that you have enough of a relationship with him to yell. And we usually only yell I don't yell and scream at strangers, but I've been known to yell and scream at my husband.
That's right. That's right.
And so I remember saying to somebody, once that I've gone into the church and sat in front of the tabernacle and yelled and screamed, and they were horrified. It's like, yeah, but I know he's there and I know he's listening. And
that's exactly it.
My anger he put that in me, that emotion, the possibility of it. So he's going to hear about things at times like, why is this happening? To me, it's a sign of a relationship with somebody that you're close enough to, that you can yell and be angry, but not stay, like you said, but not stay angry. You don't, with people you love, you don't stay angry forever. But you work it out and you fight it out. You battle it out, and that willingness to do that, I think, is a sign of seeking holiness.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Trying to come together when you know that you have a real problem with somebody, but finally, eventually coming back together. That's the key to actually having a relationship. That's exactly right. That's exactly
right. And the openness to forgiveness, and like you said before, dialogue, the ability to yell and scream, but also to listen. Or at least try.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I think.
But another thing is I do not. Well, I sort of do candy coat what happens in the actual dungeons of Rome. I do portray the torture pretty much exactly, and again, after a lot of research, exactly as it happened. Now, when I took it to my wife to read and the editors, I actually had an editor say, okay, you got to tone this down only because it gave me nightmares for 2 weeks. So when you read about the tortures that Saint Nicholas went through and the dungeons of Rome in the day, know that I toned it down. It was actually worse than what's portrayed in the book. That's the one place I actually did pull back a little bit.
I do think when you write about things, you have to make some decision about who your audience is.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And there's, I mean, I think of Flannery O'Connor. She didn't sugarcoat anything. But at the same time, she was aware of who her audience was, and she could only take like her grisly murder scenes so far.
Right.
She was careful to be aware. If you go over a certain edge, then you lose your audience.
That's right.
Even if you're omitting some truths.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to be careful with that. So that was probably good advice that you got.
It was. And I even going back and rereading it too many times, I noticed that, what I originally wrote was the truth, but sometimes you don't need the entirety of the truth to know what's going on. Right. It's that simple. Another thing.
I do think for most people, like, hearing that somebody was beat up physically, you can push that envelope a lot farther than somebody's being beat up sexually. That just is just sometimes just way too raw a situation. And also your book is wonderful, and I would like to be able to hand it to a teenager, or at least an older teenager, but not expose them to too much, especially in our society that's got so much graphic bad stuff sexually everywhere, that they're being hurt by to begin with.
Exactly.
So be very careful how much of that they're exposed to. There's also a difference. Our sexuality is much more precious than, say, our head or our arm.
Right, exactly.
So if somebody cuts my arm off, as grisly and horrible as that is, it's radically different than if I'm raped.
Exactly.
Because that's a different part of my being entirely. And affects me entirely differently. So I think you can be much more graphic with what I want to call normal violence than you can be with sexual violence, even though you can allude to it, which you do, like in The Three French Hens. I was shocked when that came up, because that was one of the earlier writings. It was like, whoa.
That was the point.
But at the same time, I was like, this is what was happening there. But you weren't graphic with it. You just alluded to it in The Three French Hens of what was happening in Nazi Germany at the time to the women. So it was, I think that was a good call to keep your audience in mind.
I appreciate that. No, the one other thing and the last thing I really want to say about Saint Nicholas Society being rated R is I do show the baseness of certain human beings. People that are outside of God, that don't even consider God's position in the world, but consider themselves above other people. There's one, and then there is a sexual situation in there, and I, again, very carefully pulled back from what could have and was happening.
Right.
You need to realize that there are human beings out there that are base. And it doesn't matter how much we try, it doesn't matter how much we help, it doesn't matter how much we communicate to them. They're always going to be that way because that is the choice they've made. I would love to say every character at the end of my book is happy and goes off skipping into heaven happily. There are a couple of people that follow their heart right down the line and stay base through the entire thing. And you actually see them stay that way, making that choice all the way at the end of the book. So again, this is not something to take with you to holy hour. I would not suggest that. but it is a book that's going to show you reality of the human condition and how you can and should become a saint.
Amen. So going over to the 12 stories,
Sure.
I was trying, what's your favorite? I fell in love with the French hens. Let's just see here. I've got them all written down. I love the different voices. I want to talk about your different voices. I love the 6 geese a laying. That was the one told from the point of, 7 swans a swimming. It was told from the point of the view of the dog, which I just love the dog. And I love the signets. And, I started putting hearts on all of them after that.
Good. That's good.
I loved how you played with, that you didn't always have the traditional meaning. I love the 5 golden rings. That was
good.
Really fun, of those onion rings on a diner. It
Yep.
was just, lots of different voices. Tell me about what's your favorite one. Do you have a favorite?
Honestly,
and then I want to know your wife's favorite one.
Well, it's really funny. My favorite changes quite literally from day to day. It depends on what mood I'm in. I really, out of the 12, I have hit, today's my favorite. This is my favorite. It really does shift from day to day. And what's funny is with my writing, I will write things. I will run them by first and foremost through my wife to make sure she likes it or it works for her. And then I send out all of my writing to what I call it, or is called in the industry, a beta test. I'll send it to anywhere from 20 to 50 people typically to get feedback from them, what they like, what they don't like, what this, that, and the other. I will or won't change a story based on that, but at least I get the feedback of what other people think of that particular piece. Out of 45 different people that went through True Love, I came up with the exact same number of this is my favorite for each and every story.
Oh, I love it.
Every single one had almost exactly the same number of how many they liked. So it really does strike somebody all the way across the board. So for me, today, my favorite would probably be number 12. But today, this morning, it might be number 12. By tonight, it might be number 4. Yeah, it really does depend. Everything does depend.
Interesting. I could almost see the whole book being made into like a film, like little mini films. It was just really wonderful. I don't know if you've ever seen the shorts that the film industry does, the little 5-minute shorts or 10-minute shorts. And I could see these being made into shorts and that they would just be wonderful.
The reason I even wrote these was over a 12-year period of time. I was singing all over the place domestically here in the United States for a while. And Lisa was working as a stage manager for many different companies across the United States. We didn't have a whole lot of money, so it really does harken back to the O. Henry story, the gift of the Magi. Yep. We don't really have that much, so what can we do to make things for each other for Christmas?
Right.
And Lisa fell upon the idea of embroidery, so she would embroider me handkerchiefs. This is her first embroidery outline of a cat. Oh. And then we moved on, and I love you.
Oh, cute.
And then we went to Iceland, so I love you in Icelandic. And I sang in Beijing, so there it is, I love you in Chinese. So these became a traditional gift that I get every year, even from back in the day.
That's awesome.
And for me, I was like, I do a lot of woodwork and craft work and that type of thing. But I didn't have a shop at the time. We were in an apartment. So it was like, okay, what can I create? And I've always been able to tell stories. I mean, as an opera singer, that's all I do is tell stories from other people's perspective. So I figured, let's try this. So I wrote the first story, and it became a hit with her. And so, like I said, as of June, she was like, okay, what's number 2? What are you going to do for, 2 turtle doves? What's the next story coming? And so it just kind of turned into a thing that we did over a 12-year period of time.
How did you find or choose these different voices? Because there's a lot of different voices in both your books. But in this one, right down to the dog, or right up to the dog, I should say.
No, voices are fun. For voices, I really look for what's going to tell the story the best. And for me, well, just like in the Canticle of Daniel, sun and moon bless the Lord. Okay, well, that means the sun and the moon must have a voice of some kind, right?
Right.
So we try to tell the story from that personal perspective. The one thing that I always look for when I tell a story is, what's the emotion going to be? We can hear a story, but then it becomes a history and I forget about that next week. If a story hits us emotionally, that story will stick with us.
Right.
So I look for who is going to be able to tell this story from an emotional perspective that we will understand and it will hit us and stay with us. So to me, it has to have that emotional depth before the story will really become a living thing.
That's interesting. I teach homiletics, or I have taught up until the pandemic, homiletics. And I just wrote my book on homiletics, and it's called Home for the Homily.
Aha.
And I talk about the idea that the homily has to move from its home in the Mass to the home of the intellect. You have to understand it, to the home of the heart. You know, it has to get to the home of the heart, and then eventually the home of the will, where you act it out. But if it doesn't get to the home of the heart, if you don't have any emotional connection, you just have an intellectual one, you'll lose it. It'll go away very quickly.
No, that's very true. In fact, I'll be probably be hitting you up here pretty soon. I'm actually an aspirant in the diaconate for Kansas City.
That's right.
So
yeah.
I'm going into the diaconate. So I'll be calling you here shortly and getting pointers on that.
Great. I'd love it. Love it. Have worked with people via Zoom for homiletics.
Good.
And I worked with a permanent deacon for the last year here.
Very good.
Which was really fun because he was not a good homilist, and now he's a quite good homilist. So he was willing to work with me for a year, and I put him through the ringer. But I could do that with you via Zoom.
You're on.
I'd love it.
Challenge. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
But you're already a good storyteller, so you have that sense of one. I call it the one egg homily. That sense of you have one emotion, one plan, one thing that you're zeroing. You're not all over the place.
Yeah.
So you already have a really good sense of that. Yeah.
That's the key. Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, like writing these stories, it's one thing to have a title like Three French Hens. Okay, where do you go with that? So for me, it helps if I have guardrails to write by. You create your own rules, so to speak, of that particular story. Three French Hens and all 12. I also paired up not just with the 12 days of Christmas, but I paired it up with the Boy Scout laws. I was a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, the whole thing. So each day has its own law. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, right on down the line. So trustworthy, loyal, helpful. Helpful comes in with Three French Hens. So we merge the two together. How can I make these situations helpful? How are they helpful? And then particularly...
You mean helpful to your reader?
No, the actual word helpful comes into the story by one girl helping the other girl in situations within World War II in France. Even though they were different religions, they had different backgrounds, they had different socioeconomic situations.
Right.
The girls helped each other lifelong because they were friends.
Right.
So those are the two guardrails. We have number one, Three French Hens. Obviously, it had to be in France. How do we deal with the word hen? I'll leave that to the reader for that.
Love that.
Then we have the guardrail of helpful. that has to fall into that story in some way. Helpful has to be in there. And then, particularly with my writing, I like to add one other parameter, and that's how can I tell this story as a parable? So I'll look for different parables to match that with, or I will go ahead and find something from the catechism. How can I highlight that within the story without giving it away, but turn this story itself either into a moral of the story or turn it into a new parable? So that's generally how I write. I try to create these guidelines or these, bumpers on either side and stay within the ditches.
Okay, well, you did a great job of it, and the stories, I really want to recommend them to our listeners here. They're wonderful. They are, like we've said, meant for probably what age, 16 and up? With a rating
the entire book,
PG-13.
Yes. The entire book, yes. I mean, there are a couple of F-bombs. I didn't write any F-bombs that I can think of. So for language, I'd say PG. Situational, definitely PG. So we're talking PG rating.
But quite a few of them are stories that you could read to someone younger and leave certain sentences out as well.
Exactly. And that's, I had one of my people in the beta reading is a fourth grade teacher. She actually read the stories to her fourth grade class and just omitted a single sentence or omitted a word. And the kids are wanting to buy the book now.
Because they're wonderful stories
wait
about
until you're at least 12.
There was a book that came out years ago. I'm trying to remember who wrote it, but it had two titles: How to Poop in the Woods and How to in the Woods.
Oh yeah.
So you might have to put out the two versions of the.
It very well may have to happen. That's right. We'll talk to the publisher about that.
The teen and younger version and and this one. Oh gosh. So what has your you asked the question, I always have my authors send me a few questions. What has your feedback from readers been?
Feedback's been really good. Like I said, the feedback has been interesting on both. I have people from all over the place and all different kinds of walks of life actually taking to heart. Particularly, it's really funny, particularly the Saint Nikolas Society. I've had, of all things, 6 different conversion stories. People have said, I read your book. Man, I was angry at God. I cannot tell you, I didn't think God would want to have anything to do with me after I've lived my life. And I read how Fred actually went into a church and accidentally knelt down one day. And it really struck home with me because I hadn't been in a church in 25 years. For some reason, I just walked into a church one day. And over these types of things, I have several people either coming back to the faith that had dropped out or are starting to look at the faith for the first time. They'd never seen it before. And I guess it was day before yesterday, I received see if I can find it. I received a note, and I'll omit the names, from a gentleman in prison. And this is really odd because these things don't really typically happen to people. But I did receive this note, and again, I'll omit his name. Dear Mr. Ben, my name is, and I'm doing some time for some really stupid stuff, kind of the same stuff that Fred did in your book. I was high one night. I stole some stuff and burned my ex-wife's car. I've been locked up for 3 years now, and I got 1 more to go. My sister-in-law gave me a copy of the Saint Nikolas Society, and I love this because it's totally misspelled. And it hit me really hard. I mean, really hard. I mean, I didn't think I had anything to look forward to. I mean, I am Fred. I got no one. It's been hard for me to see that I'm actually worth anything to anyone anymore. But now I see that it's not what we take, but what we give that makes us who we are. I mean, I didn't know all the stuff you wrote about Saint Nicholas. I mean, he really went through it all. But Fred, I mean, wow, he really went through it. And for him to come out on the other side with hope, well, that's the real thing. I read the whole thing through 2 times, and I'm starting a 3rd time. I've started doing quiet things here in the prison for some of the people around me, and it really takes them by surprise. It really makes me feel good. Thank you for writing the book. I just wanted you to know it really meant a lot to me. I hope to meet you someday on the outside. And then he signs his name. So,
well, that's certainly confirmation you're doing God's work.
It's things like that that really make you really realize that, yeah, this is something special, and this is something that you've been called to do.
That's awesome. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Well, I really wish you well with the book. Christmas is coming. And so
well,
I do think
let me show the covers really quick then. We have first the Saint Nikolas Society, and it's award-winning already.
Beautiful.
And then we have True Love, 12 Christmas Stories My True Love Gave to Me.
I have a friend who's already asked for a copy of it. I'm going to have you send me a copy.
I'll be happy to sign it. Just hit up menu, Ben Bongers -author.com. I'm happy to sign personal copies to whoever wants them. That's fine.
Do that.
Same thing with the Saint Nicholas Society. Or you can get them through all your typical suspects. You can go through, Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Thrift Books or en route, booksandmedia.com. So
awesome.
all the regulars.
That's good. Could you hold up the picture of Saint Nicholas again that you have there?
Absolutely.
No, the picture done of the actual Saint Nicholas. We'll see that. Do you still have that there? Is that the one that was done from his bones?
Oh, the picture. Sorry. Oh, yes.
Yeah. I just realized looking at you, you look like a younger version of it. I just wanted to
hope I didn't have to get through the same things he went through. I'll tell you, he really went through it.
It's very interesting. Yeah. You have his nose.
Oh,
and this part. So before we close, anything else you would like to talk about? There's so many things. I mean, would love to go through the stories, but I know we don't have time. Plus, I don't want it to be a spoiler, but the 12 stories are really wonderful. Each one is totally different.
Well, my big thing is read through the stories, Saint Nicholas Society and 12 Days or True Love, 12 Christmas Stories My True Love Gave to Me. There are many, many, many levels to each one. You can read them just as a story. You can read them as a parable. You can read them as a depth in looking at your religion or your faith. You can look at them just as, how do I interact with other people? And every story has a very different level. I write on at least 5 to 6 different levels. So read through them several times and let me know what you find each time. I'd love to hear from you.
I will. What's coming up next? What are you working on?
Well, I have, in fact, the person that illustrated the 12-Day or True Love, the same illustrator is working on a children's book that we're hoping to have out in probably mid-November. Right now, the working title is The Farmer, the Miner, and the Artisan. And it's 3 people from very different backgrounds that come to Petra in the Middle East to sell their wares, stumble upon these 3 magi that that are attacked, and help them come back and escort them to Jerusalem, to the king, where he's supposed to be. This new king is being born under this new star. They leave them there and they go to Bethlehem and are the first ones actually on the scene at the birth of Christ and actually give their very first, or their very last gifts, the very last things they have to this newborn king.
Okay, so you definitely have this Christmas theme in your writing. I'm very
Just a
interested
little
in
bit. Just a little bit.
I love Christmas. It's a wonderful, wonderful time of the year. My mom died on Christmas morning.
Aw.
And it was wonderful because I grew up with Christmas was her favorite day of the year. She loved Christmas. And so it was very appropriate that she headed home to celebrate Christmas with Jesus. So a lot of people go, "Oh, that's too bad," but I'm like, no, it was perfect.
It's the perfect birthday into heaven. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, so it was beautiful. So you want to end us with a prayer, please?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. As the Psalms say, unless the Lord builds the house, who build it? Laborers build in vain. Lord, help us build our stories that we create. Help us set solid foundations, and help us tell the stories you wish us to be told. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, and again, thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you, Kiki.
Good luck. I love you guys. You're permanent deacons. The church needs permanent deacons so badly.
Well, I agree.
And you bring a whole different life experience to the church. My favorite guys at the seminary to work with were the PDs. They were just great.
And like I said, we create that stability within the community itself. We are the public works, so to speak, in that community.
Yeah, so stay in touch with me. And
will do. Will do.
Where to find me, and I wish you luck with that.
Can
you end us with a song?
Oh my. Sure. Let me think. Just a small piece. How's that?
A little one.
L'aurora di bianco vestita, ti ha luce di schiuda, gran sol, e già con la luce sue dita, carezza di fiori la stuol. Mattinata. It's a great old Italian art song.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiki. Have a great day.
God bless. And when your other book comes out, get in touch with me. We'll do another fun interview.
I'd be happy to. Thanks,
all right,
Kiki.
Thank you. All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.